Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Whitehaven Coal Limited's 2020 Annual General Meeting. My name is Mark Vaile and I'm the Chairman of the Whitehaven Board of Directors and will chair today's meeting. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the meeting today is being held virtually and we will deal with the agenda items in the following order. Firstly, our introduction. Secondly, my Chairman's address. Third will be the Managing Director's presentation. Fourth, Q&A, and fifth item will be vote results. Every effort has been made to ensure the meeting runs smoothly today. However, if any technological issues arise and it becomes necessary to provide procedural information, updates will be provided on our website. If you experience any technological difficulties, please contact the Help Centre using the contact details set out in the notice of meeting. A recording of this meeting will also be available on our website following the meeting. I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Can I also extend a warm welcome to Nathan Moran, CEO of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, who will deliver a welcome to country.
Bujari Gamarua, Dian Bibana Gamarada Gadigal Nagara. In the local Gadigal language of the Eora Nation, this translates to G'day, women, men, friends from Gadigal country, where I am based. On behalf of Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, being the representative body and body responsible for the protection and preservation of all Aboriginal culture and heritage within our boundaries, that includes the Sydney CBD, and surrounding 23 local government areas, from Canterbury Bankstown to Cessnock, or for us culturally from Bidjigal to Wiradjuri to Wonnarua. As the CEO of Metro Local Aboriginal Land Council, I welcome you all for your 2020 Annual General Meeting for Whitehaven Coal, from Gadigal Nagara or country. And I wish to acknowledge all the respective traditional owners and custodians for the areas that you join for today's meeting. Metro Land Council has a proud distinction of being the first local Aboriginal Land Council in New South Wales, established in 1972 in the Campaign for National Land Rights. We were previously known as Redfern Land Council, and then in 1984 we have become officially incorporated in what we are today as Metropolitan Local Land Council. Metro Land Council members are a reflection of the entire state of New South Wales, with our members coming from all over New South Wales. All the Kuris, Murris and Guris are represented in our membership. Metro Land Council acknowledges that the evidence of the first use of coal was found in the beach and dune middens at Lake Macquarie in and around Swansea's Heads. This attributes to our use of coal going back thousands of years, as it was decried in the report known as Stockton 23. And now in contemporary Australia, we acknowledge that black coal has its first notable exportation in 1799 after being discovered in 1791. We'd like to think that in doing this today, that Whitehaven will see to expand the operations of what it's doing by centrally working with the traditional ecological and cultural knowledges of our people to ensure that sustainable practices are returned in preserving what is the most important asset on earth that we have, Mother Earth. So here's to hoping and having more joint ventures led by our traditional ecological and cultural knowledges in partnership with modern businesses such as yourselves at Whitehaven. And now in closing, Bujuri Gamarua, Dian Babana, Gamarada, Gadigal Nagara. May you all have a good, if not deadly day for your AGM in 2020.
Thank you, Nathan, for such a warm welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a quorum present and I formally declare the meeting open. The notice of meeting has been distributed and will be taken as read. Joining me online today are my fellow directors, John Condy, AO, Deputy Chairman of the Board and Chairman of the Remuneration Committee. Paul Flynn, our Managing Director and CEO. Dr. Julie Beeby, Chairman of the Health, Safety, Environment and Community Committee. Fiona Robertson, Chairman of the Audit Risk Management Committee. Lindsay Ward and Ray Sage. Also joining me are Tim Burt, our Company Secretary, Kevin Ball, our CFO, and Ian Humphries, our Executive General Manager, Operations. Ryan Fisk and Simon Hannigan, partners of Ernst & Young, Whitehaven's auditor, are also present. As this is a shareholders' meeting, only shareholders, their attorneys, proxies, and authorised company representatives are entitled to ask questions, make comments, and vote. Questions can be submitted on any item of business and will be answered later in the meeting. I would also like to remind everyone to be respectful of all shareholders who have taken the time to participate in today's virtual meeting. We welcome questions from all shareholders, but it is important to give everyone an opportunity to participate. To that end, please keep your questions short and to the point. In the interests of time, questions may be moderated or amalgamated if there are multiple questions on the same topic. Please include the item of business that your question relates to. Please do not submit more than one question at a time and limit yourself to 2 questions or comments. Any members of the media seeking to ask follow-up questions should call the media contact number listed on the Whitehaven website directly. Voting will be conducted by a poll on all items of business. If you are eligible to vote at this meeting, a polling icon will be available on your screen. Selecting this icon will bring up a list of resolutions to vote on. There is no need to select Submit or click the Enter button as the vote is automatically recorded. You do, however, have the ability to change your vote up until the time I declare voting is closed. Resolutions 5 and 6 have been requisitioned by a group of shareholders holding approximately 32,000 shares, representing 0.003% of the company's voting capital. Voting on Resolution 6 is contingent on Resolution 5 being passed as a special resolution. The vote results for Resolutions 1 to 5 will be displayed following the Q&A section of the meeting. If Resolution 5 is passed, Resolution 6 will then be open for voting. I now declare voting on Resolutions 1 to 5 open. Please submit your votes at any time whilst voting is open. I will give you a warning later in the meeting before I close voting. I am holding open proxies in my capacity as chairman, and it is my intention to vote all available proxies in favour of all resolutions with the exception of Resolution 5 and 6, for which open proxies will be voted against. The screen now shows details of the proxies received in advance of the meeting on Resolutions 1 to 5. I will now turn to my chairman's address, which was released to the ASX this morning. Ladies and gentlemen and shareholders, FY20 was not a year anyone could have predicted. Even for our sector, which is accustomed to cyclical lows, it has proven to be a uniquely challenging one. COVID-19 has been remarkable in terms of its rapid onset and spread, and the significant disruption it has caused to global supply chains and economies. At the start of the pandemic, many of our key customers in North Asia acted decisively to respond to the threat of the virus, as did Australia itself. Since that time, these nations have been able to demonstrate considerable resilience, even while others faltered. This meant that through the second half of FY20, our coal remained well sold in many of our key markets, which also gives us optimism for the time when we are better able to contain and control COVID-19 worldwide. Notwithstanding the fact demand held up relatively well, we could not avoid the downturn in price that negatively impacted all our key energy commodities. I acknowledge challenges persist in this area, but they are by no means insurmountable. In recent weeks, we have begun to see meaningful improvement in benchmark coal pricing. The forward curve is also looking stronger, so it is likely a fundamental shift is occurring and a broad-based coal price recovery across both thermal and metallurgical markets is now underway. It is pleasing that amid the various efforts to reduce costs in the business up to now, we have not had to resort to the type of deep workforce cuts and restructuring experienced elsewhere. Just as we did during the worst of the drought, which thankfully is easing across Eastern Australia, Whitehaven has continued to play a positive role in the New South Wales and Australian economies, keeping people in well-paid work, supply chains moving and royalties flowing. On behalf of the entire board, I want to take this opportunity to commend Managing Director and CEO Paul Flynn and the entire executive leadership team on their dedication and diligence in managing a tough year and a testing convergence of events. The arrangements implemented by management to protect against COVID-19 were swift, comprehensive and effective. Other demanding and complex issues that arose during the year were also successfully overcome. From supporting our operations through the drought, to addressing acute labour shortages, to managing the growing appetite for environmental, social and governance strategy and performance data among our investment community. It was a commendable team effort. At the same time, charting a pathway from COVID-19 and towards better performance and greater prosperity means acknowledging those areas where we have not met the high standards our shareholders expect. Let me assure investors that each member of the board recognises the need to address these aspects, particularly in relation to improving our environmental compliance and delivering greater consistency of output from our larger mines. The road out of the current economic downturn and our company's transformation to a more efficient, cost-effective producer will not always be easy. There are, however, good reasons to be confident, starting with the fact we have weathered low points in the cycle before and delivered for patient shareholders in the periods that followed, and that will inevitably occur again. We have invested significantly in our leadership capability and structure. Our desire for more consistent and predictable operation performance, in particular, which we have already seen in Q1 of FY21, is underpinned by a number of fresh faces and deep sectoral experience in the operational leadership team. The fundamentals of our business remain strong. We have a significant role to play in the local and global economic recovery, and indeed in a more carbon-conscious world. In its World Energy Outlook 2019, the IEA estimates that the more than $1 trillion of capital invested in existing global coal-fired generation, most of which is in Asia, is yet to be recovered. We expect our customer nations to capitalise on their installed and planned coal-fired power generation to underpin their economic recoveries when the threat of the pandemic is either eliminated or can be sustainably managed. We continue to cautiously progress the expansion of our business. Our key development projects, Vickery and Winchester South, will help us to further diversify our product mix with a greater weighting towards metallurgical coal with low impurities. Our strong relationships with customers in India will put us in good position to meet the forecast growth in demand for metallurgical coal in that market, particularly once Vickery and Winchester South are operational. We continue to work with a range of stakeholders to share our views on the role high-quality coal will play as part of the continuing global energy transition, as well as a range of other ESG-related issues. In FY19, we reported against voluntary recommendations of the Financial Stability Board's Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD, and we repeated this exercise again this year. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are recommending shareholders vote against the resolutions promoted by market forces. The view of the board that these resolutions are not in the interest of a majority of shareholders, and I reiterate that the Paris Agreement does not dictate to signatories how emissions reductions should be achieved, and it is a misrepresentation to suggest it requires Whitehaven to wind up its production assets. Under the IEA's World Energy Outlook scenarios, there will continue to be demand for coal beyond 2040. Whitehaven has a key role to play in global carbon emission reduction efforts by supplying and promoting the use of very high quality coal in the most modern and efficient technological applications available today and in the future. We have demonstrated the resilience of our operating asset portfolio in more aggressive decarbonising scenarios that are consistent with the objectives of the Paris Agreement in our response to the recommendations of the TCFD. In relation to the other resolutions today, both Dr. Julie Beeby and Ray Zage are standing for re-election as directors. Julie and Ray are both outstanding and highly capable members of Whitehaven's board, and I encourage all shareholders to vote in favour of these resolutions. You'll now hear from Julie and Ray directly.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning, shareholders and guests. I'm very pleased to be standing for election to the board of Whitehaven Coal today and welcome the opportunity to represent you, our shareholders. I have over 25 years executive and more recently non-executive director experience in the resources industry, with particular experience in coal mining, coal utilisation, mining services and coal seam gas. My roles have included technology research, coal mine site operations, long-term planning, corporate strategy, mergers and acquisitions, and I've been Chief Executive Officer of both a listed and non-listed resources company. I'm currently on one other board, which is the role of Non-Executive Director of Tasmanian Networks Proprietary Limited. Since joining the board 5 years ago, I've been pleased with the growth and maturity of Whitehaven Coal, and I am keen to continue my role to progress this into the future. I'm currently a member of the Governance and Nominations Committee, and I'm Chair of the Health, Safety, Environment and Community Committee. In this role, I've been pleased to contribute to Whitehaven's growing investment in its community engagement task and also its evolving reporting on sustainability matters. While there has been a halt during the current COVID restrictions, I've had the pleasure of regularly inspecting our coal mines so that I can more clearly understand our operations. I'm familiar with the challenges and issues within the coal industry. I have lived and worked in the Hunter Valley and Central Queensland coal regions, and I have a good understanding of the various external stakeholders to our industry. With this depth and breadth of experience, I consider I can make a valuable contribution to the Whitehaven board and, should I be elected, look forward to working with my fellow directors and management to continue the expansion of Whitehaven Coal. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to attend the AGM. In terms of my renomination for the board, this will be the first time I am coming as an independent director. As many of you would know, I've been involved with Whitehaven going back to the original Aston Resources time period in history before the merger with Whitehaven, and became a director on behalf of Fairlawn Capital Management, which has historically been a large shareholder in Aston Resources and Whitehaven over many years. Fairlawn has been a seller of the shares, and my relationship with Fairlawn has changed. I'm now just an advisor to the fund and have set up my own business, but have retained personal ownership in Whitehaven over that time and continued to be actively involved in the board. I'm very much looking forward to the chance to travel back to Sydney, as the last number of months, all of these meetings have been done via video conference and Zoom, as is the case with the AGM, but would look forward to continuing to be involved with the company and the business over time. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Julie and Ray. Ladies and gentlemen, our business remains robust with the right assets, people and strategy to continue to deliver value for our shareholders over the medium to long term. I would like to thank my fellow directors, senior management and the entire workforce for their significant efforts. And on behalf of the board, I would like to thank our joint venture partners, banking syndicate and you, our many shareholders, for your ongoing support. Thank you, and I will now hand over to Paul Flynn for his presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome everybody to Whitehaven Coal's 2020 Annual General Meeting, our first virtual AGM. Today, I'll recap on Whitehaven's financial results and how we as an organisation have performed during the year, and what a year it has been. First, we experienced the impacts of extended drought, then bushfires, flooding rains, and now a global pandemic resulting in near historical low coal prices. Secondly, I'll be focusing on how Whitehaven will navigate through these challenging times with a focus on capital discipline and operational improvement. In addition, I'll give an update to our customer markets in Asia. A recap on Whitehaven's strategy and purpose would be useful before we explore the detail of the year just past and those ahead. In challenging times, it's important to remember who we are as a company and what we're trying to achieve. As you can see on the slide, Whitehaven's strategy is clear. We are owners and operators of valuable assets producing premium thermal coal and semi-soft coking coal. We are focused on increasing our share in this market in Asia, which is the centre of global economic growth and relatedly coal demand. Our purpose is to support and sustain regional communities through the successful operation of our assets. Sustainable development underpins everything we do at Whitehaven. As a proudly Australian company, we believe we have a key role to play in helping regional communities to grow and prosper. Our STRIVE principles, outlined here on this slide, guide us as to how we go about our work. And one of the ways we make this contribution is through providing sustainable, long-term, rewarding career opportunities to those who live or want to live in the areas surrounding our operations. Through employment, we also contribute to supporting diversity in the local workforce through direct engagement with the Indigenous community and encouraging increased female participation at our operations. As the largest private sector contributor in the local community, we support not only individuals through employment, but also through local procurement, community partnerships, and by paying our federal, state and local taxes. We understand mining to be more, much more, than just an industrial process. Instead, mining is an enterprise that offers an opportunity to change people's lives for the better, and noted here on this slide are some important metrics that evidence our contribution in this regard. As a case in point demonstrating our local orientation, many of our shareholders will know we pay particular attention to addressing Indigenous disadvantage in our region. Our holistic approach to making meaningful contributions to the youngest in their formative years at Winchester Child and Family Centres, to supporting school participation with the Clontarf Foundation and the Girls Academy, to well-paid careers in a growing company is something we're all proud of. Ensuring the rest of our people have a heightened sense of cultural awareness aids the cohesion of a singular workforce, and real commercial trade with Indigenous businesses pays this forward. Another aspect of supporting and sustaining regional communities is through the environmental management of the land on which we operate. As a mining company, operationally, we are focused on air quality, water usage, noise and blast vibration management at our sites. Equally important is the investment in land-based biodiversity offsets, revegetation, and site rehabilitation. We recognise environmental compliance is an area where we must address some more recent shortcomings. While our year-on-year record of environmental compliance is good considering the growing scale of our business, FY20 outcomes did not reflect our own expectations or what our community and other stakeholders deserve. While environmental harm arising from these non-compliances was minimal, any instance of non-compliance is cause for concern and must be addressed. As always, the safety of our people, workplaces and communities is our first priority. As you can see on the slide, over the last decade, we have seen significant production growth with the Narrabri underground mine and Maules Creek mines coming online. Importantly, as production has increased, our safety record has improved significantly. This relationship is essential for sustainable development. In FY20, we continued to improve our safety performance, reaching a total recordable injury frequency rate of 4.13, a record low in our history. This is a significant achievement, but we continue to guard against complacency and work towards zero harm. Relatedly, our COVID-19 response demonstrated our adaptability and resilience in the face of new threats. Our crisis management, HSE and production teams work seamlessly in a fast-moving environment to design and implement measures to keep our people and, by implication, our communities safe. We have been rewarded with no known cases of COVID-19, but we must be ever vigilant. We have managed to maintain continuity of production and employment throughout this entire period. Crucially, this meant our contribution to local communities, businesses and the economy could continue with minimal disruption, providing Northwest New South Wales with a strong sense of optimism. Whilst we may think our value proposition as a company is directed to local needs, how can we be sure it resonates? That's why we commission independent qualitative and quantitative sentiment testing in our local community approximately every 18 months. This independent, statistically significant polling shows that since 2015, net sentiment has trended up, meaning we are viewed overall more positively than negatively across the communities where we operate. Our reputation across Gunnedah, Narrabri, Tamworth and Liverpool Plains local government areas has improved over the last few years. The outcome of the latest survey reflects growing community recognition for the work we do in the region and how Whitehaven plays a key role in regional communities. This feedback tells us we're on the right path and also directs us to areas where more effort is required. It is this feedback loop that reaffirms our view that there is no notion of long-term sustainability if the community that hosts our business doesn't embrace us as an essential part of the community. Now moving to a recap of our operational performance for FY20. The 12 months to 30 June 2020 has seen our markets and some aspects of our operations impacted by events outside our control. But despite drought, bushfires and of course COVID-19, we achieved our revised production and sales guidance, with managed coal production of 20.6 million tonnes and managed coal sales, excluding purchased coal, of 17.5 million tonnes. Whilst these totals were less than planned, structural changes have been made to ensure FY21 delivers better results. Operational highlights for the year include our Narrabri underground mine recording its second million-tonne month in April. Not many underground mines in Australia can claim that. Our large open cut operation, Maules Creek, also saw a record quarter of production with 4.2 million tonnes in Q4, evidencing the benefits of improvements made. As I mentioned earlier, we continue to see improvements in our total recordable injury frequency rate of 4.13, which is a record low for the company. And just after the year closed, we were pleased to receive the IPC's approval of our 10 million tonne per annum Vickery expansion project. The softening of the Newcastle index thermal coal price had a significant impact on FY20 results. At a high level, we received an average of $104 Australian per tonne in FY20 compared to $150 Australian per tonne in FY19. Quite a dramatic turnaround. Relatedly, EBITDA of 306 million Australian dollars was down 69% on financial year 2019 as a result. Our capital management during this downturn in the market has ensured we have a healthy level of liquidity, just shy of $470 million at 30 June 2020, which is supported by the refinancing of our $1 billion senior debt facility earlier in the year. As reported in our September 2020 quarter production report, which was issued last week, this strong liquidity level remains unchanged from 30 June. We have now agreed with our banking syndicate a revised interest cover ratio covenant that will ensure we have added flexibility if the COVID-19 induced market softness persists over an extended period of time. Now to the main profit and loss and balance sheet items of the FY20 results. As mentioned, the single biggest influence on our earnings performance for the year was, of course, the coal price, which reached cyclical lows. Whilst I called out the impact of COVID-19 on industrial activity in our export markets, coal prices had softened ahead of the pandemic due to a surplus gas supply in the market. The decrease in EBITDA from $1 billion Australian in FY19 to $306 million Australian in FY20, as outlined, reflects the decrease in coal prices, but also an increased cost base related to underperformance on the production side. In these circumstances, it's important to observe a disciplined approach to capital allocation and maintaining a strong balance sheet through the cycle. At the end of the financial year, our net debt stood at $787.5 million, which includes $216 million of equipment finance leases and $62 million of ECA facilities. We have purposely sought to diversify our sources of capital. This slide is intended to provide shareholders with more colour as to the movement in EBITDA from FY19, a record for us, to this unique FY20. As mentioned, the largest impact on lower EBITDA was the softer pricing environment for both thermal and metallurgical products. In US dollar terms, we experienced a $34 per tonne decrease in thermal coal realisations and a US $30 per tonne decrease in metallurgical coal realisations. Currency played a favourable role at 67 cents average for the year compared to 72 cents for FY19. Lower raw coal production gave rise to increased unit costs, also affected earnings, but this slide is useful to give you a sense of the proportion of the influences of each of these factors during the year. To explain operational performance, I'll step through each of our operations. Firstly, Maules Creek, our largest operation. Run-of-mine production at 100% managed level for the year was 10.7 million tonnes, which was 8% down on FY19. As we have previously reported to the market, the first half of FY20 was tough at Maules Creek, with operations being affected by both labour shortages and by dust and smoke events associated with drought conditions and regional bushfires. The labour shortages and operational interruptions impacted overburden movements and coal production. Management implemented a revised labour strategy for Maules Creek, which delivered positive outcomes over the second half of FY20, as illustrated in the graph with H2 performance of 6.5 million tonnes. Neither labour nor water supply should be issues in FY21. Looking forward to FY21, we are guiding ROM production at 11.3 to 12 million tonnes. Guidance reflects increased utilisation of the mining fleet, reflecting improvements in staffing and productivity levels. As previously reported, Narrabri's production for the first half was impacted by the 8-week scheduled longwall changeout from longwall panel 108 to 109. The longwall restarted production on 6th of January and took 4 weeks to ramp up to normal production levels. As you can see on the graph, ROM production for the second half of FY20 saw a significant uplift as the longwall returned to running at normal capacity, with a record 1 million tonne month in April. Looking forward to FY21, we are guiding ROM production of 6 to 6.7 million tonnes. Guidance reflects a longwall move from longwall 09 to 10 in Q3 FY21. This guidance level is consistent with operating at depth until we move back into shallower ground in the southern panels, where historical levels of cost and volume are much improved. Our Gunnedah open cuts now consist of Tarrawonga and Werris Creek, as both Rockglen and Sunnyside have now closed and are in their rehabilitation phases. You can see in the chart the impact of these two mines closing on overall ROM production in FY20. Looking forward to FY21, we are guiding ROM production of 3.7 to 4.1 million tonnes. The guidance reflects Tarrawonga with increased production year on year due to the commissioning of the new fleet, partially offset by an increase in strip ratio in the first half. We are expecting a slight increase in ROM production at Werris Creek, as mining has now passed through the historical underground workings, which had affected FY20 production. From this outline of our operations, it is evident that we had some operational challenges across the sites in FY20. However, these challenges have ensured we are focused on aspects of mining we can control, such as productivity and cost. This focus is already improving operational outcomes, as evidenced in the September quarter production results released to the market last week, where we reported record sales, strong production, and refined cost guidance. Responsible management of capital is particularly important in a cyclical industry. After Maules Creek was brought into production, we focused on retiring debt. Once we'd reduced the debt to manageable levels, we looked to provide returns to shareholders and invest in the business. We have returned 1.1 billion Australian dollars to shareholders since FY16, while investing to sustain our operations and in new projects that will grow and improve our business. In FY20, the board declared an unfranked dividend of 1.5 cents per share as an interim dividend, which is 50% of the full year NPAT. No final dividends recommended for FY20. With net debt in the upper half of our preferred range, our priorities remain to maintain prudent debt levels, to return surplus cash to shareholders, and continue to maintain and grow the business. Continuing this theme of capital management, our focus has long been to ensure a diversified range of funding sources, whether for corporate purposes, equipment, bonding, and rehabilitation. In November last year, we refinanced our Australian bank debt facility and guarantee lines with leading Australian and international banks out to July 2023. For funding mining equipment such as Narrabri's longwall, excavators, trucks, and ancillary equipment at our open cuts, we use both ECA facilities and equipment leasing. We concluded an ECA facility with Nexi from Japan to support procurement of mining equipment from Japanese manufacturers. As I mentioned previously, we reported liquidity of $470 million at the end of June, which remains unchanged now. Not having drawn on our facility for at least 6 months demonstrates our ability to manage capital through the lows of the commodity cycle. Our banking relationships are strong and well supported. This is evidenced by last week's announcement our financiers had adjusted our interest cover ratio to allow for more flexibility during these uncertain times. The amended financial covenant ratio will provide Whitehaven with added flexibility to navigate through calendar years 20 and 21. Other than this covenant support and distribution restriction, there are no material changes to margins or terms of the existing facilities. Whitehaven is pleased with the support of its financial providers continuing to support the company. Whitehaven is unique amongst resource companies by having a substantive and executable pipeline, both brownfields and greenfields projects. For us, that means we will replace depleting reserves through mining with new projects. Ongoing demand gives us the confidence to plan for growth, which will in turn support increased margins through product diversification, benefits of scale, and synergies across our business. This strategy of growth will ensure sustainable returns for all Whitehaven stakeholders well into the future. As you can see on this slide, our growth portfolio will see an increase in our metallurgical coal production with our greenfields projects Vickery and Winchester South. This expansion enhances our customer reach, targets additional export markets with additional production from two premier regions, the Gunnedah Basin in New South Wales and Queensland's Bowen Basin. As some of our smaller mines reach the end of their lives, our business is oriented towards scaling up larger existing operations. This includes applying to increase production at Maules Creek to 16 million tonnes per annum and extending the life of Narrabri and the jobs it supports through to 2044. I will now address the greenfields projects in our pipeline. Recently, we were pleased to receive approval from the New South Wales Independent Planning Commission for our 10 million tonne per annum metallurgical and thermal coal Vickery extension project. It is now proceeding through the federal approvals process. Vickery will not only add an additional 10 million tonnes ROM, but increases blending optionality across our business. Tarrawonga's margins will also improve as the processing of coal will be through Vickery's coal handling and preparation plant before loading directly onto Vickery's rail loop rather than road haulage. This project is currently 100% owned by us. Now that we've achieved the approval through the IPC, we will look at the possibility of having end-user joint venture partners for this particular project. All primary approvals should be received by December 2020, with secondary approvals soon thereafter. Our Winchester South metallurgical coal open cut project, situated in the Bowen Basin, is focused on finalising its main reserves and lodging the EIS this calendar year. A range of technical studies have also materially progressed to support the project. Planning for necessary on- and off-site infrastructure has also been advanced. Since acquiring the project, some 200 new drill holes have been undertaken to optimise our understanding of the product suite available in the Wrangels and Fort Cooper's coal measures. Once the final results of the coal quality project are received from the repository and assessed, Whitehaven intends to update the October 2018 JORC resource statement and declare a maiden JORC reserve statement for the project. Narrabri Stage 3 is a significant life extension and optimisation that necessitates a reapproval of the site. The central focus is the incorporation of the Southern Exploration Licence and the approval of extraction of coal in extended longwall panels up to 10 kilometres in length. This expansion will see the life of the project be extended to 2044. The project has submitted the EIS study to the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment for their adequacy review and will be released for public exhibition in the coming weeks. I wanted to turn now to the outlook for the demand for coal. Along with the rest of the world, Asia has had to deal with the impacts of COVID-19 on health and economic activity. However, in the long term, with continued economic and population growth in Asia, there will be increasing demand for energy generation, infrastructure requirements, and manufacturing and industrial output, as evidenced by forecast GDP growth in the region. Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, and India are all forecast to return to strong GDP growth in the coming calendar year and beyond, as depicted in this slide. Considering the fundamentals driving Asia's demand for high-quality coal products, we view Whitehaven as being in a prime position to make the most of emerging opportunities in the region, not just with our current portfolio of operating mines, but also through our growth projects, as there is clear and growing demand for our quality-specific coals within steelmaking, industrial, and electricity-generating sectors. Reflecting forecast growth in the Asian region, Both thermal coal and semi-soft coking coal seaborne prices are in turn forecasted to increase, reflecting the increase in industrial activity. This increase in industrial activity will require increased power generation and steel manufacturing. Of course, with COVID-19 driven policy stimulus initiatives emerging as governments around the world seek to reverse the recessionary impacts of the pandemic, greater price upside may exist. All of Whitehaven's customers are in countries who are signatories to the Paris Agreement or have domestic policies consistent with Paris Agreement objectives. Our customers rely on using our high CV, low impurity coal products to ensure they meet the regulatory standards set by their governments. Not only do our customers recognise the value of the coal products Whitehaven offers, but recent governmental recognition at both the state and federal level is welcome. In recent months, the New South Wales government issued their strategic statement on the future of coal exploration and mining in New South Wales, which recognises the strong long-term global demand for coal, particularly in our neighbouring region of Southeast Asia. The federal government recognises the important role coal will play in Australia's energy future and has included carbon capture and storage as one of its 5 priority technologies in the first low emissions technology statement. This year, we continue to review and address climate-related risks and opportunities as outlined in our 2020 Sustainability Report, which was released in September. As part of this work, Whitehaven reported against the voluntary framework recommended by the Financial Stability Board's Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, known as TCFD, to test our business resilience under various low-carbon scenarios. In FY19, we were the first pure-play listed coal company to report against the TCFD scenarios. Our analysis then is consistent with this year's review, concluding that our operations will be resilient and return positive value for shareholders under all carbon scenarios. Now turning to the year at hand, FY21. In August, when we reported FY20 results, we also provided the market with guidance on the fundamental drivers of earnings in our business, as outlined in this slide. The only change we have made since issuing this guidance on 26th of August was the refinement of our unit cost guidance. When considering the strong sales performance in the first quarter of this financial year and the early outcomes of our business improvement program, Project Strive, we have lowered the upper range of our cost guidance to $72 Australian. So our revised unit cost guidance for FY21 is now $69 to $72 Aussie per tonne of own coal sold. Looking forward to the remainder of the financial year, the business will continue to focus on improving operational discipline and maintaining a strong balance sheet, both of which have shown strong momentum as outlined in our September quarterly release to the market last week. The focus on operational improvement and a strong balance sheet will help ensure that we are well positioned to maximise earnings when coal markets begin to rebalance and recover. In conclusion, I wanted to say thank you for your continued support. I would like to register my thanks to the board for their support during this most unusual of years, and also thank our team for their commitment and drive. FY20 was a challenging year for Whitehaven, but we have taken appropriate action to ensure we are well placed for FY21 and beyond.
Thanks, Paul. We'll now move to the Q&A section of the meeting. As I explained earlier, questions can be submitted online via the Lumi platform. Thank you to those shareholders who have already submitted questions. We will now move to the first question.
The first question is Mr. Ian McAleese and Mrs. Dana McAleese. The Newcastle thermal coal price has moved just below $50 a tonne US a few weeks ago to about $60 a tonne US today. Are you able to provide some background on the factors moving the coal price? In addition, the recent move in the thermal coal price, are you able to provide Whitehaven's view on the outlook for the coal price over the next couple of years?
Thanks to Ian and Dana for the question. We've seen a depressed coal price market in recent times, and that's been impacted also by the economic downturn as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in some of our key markets. And so we obviously welcome the move that we've seen overnight of the coal price moving back up to about $60 a tonne. Obviously, the management team have worked very diligently during the course of the the last 12 months to help to mitigate the tough market that we've been in. And of course, with the release of the quarterly report last week, Paul Flynn also acknowledged or alluded to the market a change in guidance on our forecast costs, and the management team are doing a very good job in terms of managing and controlling costs during this challenging period. But I might just pass Paul Flynn, CEO, now to make some comments with regard to the outlook for coal price over the next couple of years.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Look, I think it's worthwhile noting that at the period leading into COVID, there obviously was a softening coal price, and one of the factors contributing to that was certainly a surplus of gas in the market. And so during this period, I see that gas markets have certainly strengthened, and that's been positive. But of course, COVID has come along and dampened demand in many of our key markets, as everybody has been wrestling with the impacts of COVID-19. I do note a couple of important factors as far as the more recent improvement that's been cited. Welcome to see the price above $60. Certainly, markets seem to be balancing from a supply-demand perspective. I see recent tenders out of Asia going unmet, in fact, so that does tell us that coal supply and stock positions are such that people aren't motivated to grab onto tenders at any price. That's quite positive. Our premiums have remained resilient during this period as well, which is very positive. I think the most important part to focus on, just in terms of the immediate outlook, is obviously many of our customer jurisdictions, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan in particular, are certainly in relative terms have managed COVID well. It's been terrible for everybody, of course, but those three jurisdictions in particular are on the better side of this, and we do expect them to strengthen ahead of other jurisdictions. And of course, every government around the world will be engaging in some form of stimulus in order to re-enliven or recapture some of the economic activity lost as a result of COVID-19. And we all know that when that stimulus occurs, energy is obviously fundamental to stimulus, as is steel. And I think that will play out over the next 6 to 12 months.
Thanks, Paul. We go to the next question.
The next question is from Will Vanderpoel. Whitehaven's FY20 sustainability report claims the company's future remains robust over the long term under all WEO 2019 scenarios. Current policies, steps and SDS, and the risk of Whitehaven's mines becoming stranded in a carbon-constrained world is low. How will these claims be impacted by the latest IEA SDS scenario, which project 11% lower coal production in 2030 compared to the 2019 SDS? What about under the IEA's new net zero scenario, net zero emissions by 2050, where coal demand is in 2030 55% lower than steps?
Thanks, Will, for the question. The short answer is the World Energy Outlook 2020 was only released last week. As we do each year, we will examine the report thoroughly and systematically and consider any implications for the business. And just in answering, also adding to the question, the answer, for the second time this year, we have reported under the TCFD, and those conclusions from that reporting and that analysis are part of our sustainability report. Go to the next question.
The next question is from Will Vanderpoel. Following on from my previous question relating to the sensitivity of scenario analysis to the new IEA scenarios, unfortunately there is insufficient disclosure of assumptions and modelling for shareholders to be able to assess this sensitivity analysis themselves. But presumably the board would have to know and understand these assumptions in order to sign off on the sustainability report, and can therefore provide guidance as to the sensitivity of its claims to these lower coal demand projections.
Okay, I might just flick that one to Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Look, I think we would say that we have sufficient disclosure in our scenario analysis, so we reject the proposition that we have insufficient data disclosed there. We use a transparent framework, the publicly available data provided by the scenarios used by the IEA, and they have been faithfully applied to ensure that There's no question as to the application of the scenarios as published by the IEA.
Okay, we'll go to the next question.
The next question is from Natalia Bueno. Item 1, the FY20 Sustainability Report claims that under the IEA's 2019 Sustainability Development Scenario, the company is cash flow positive until 2040, with all mines remaining net present value positive. Did this assessment include Whitehaven's proposed new and expansionary projects? Based on the expected project costs, would all of these new projects be NPV positive under the 2019 SDS scenario? Would this change under the new 2020 SDS?
Thanks for the question, Natalia. We're yet to conduct analysis under the 2020 World Outlook. We have reported against our operating asset portfolio, and we will stress test resilience at the FID stage. Yeah, next question.
The next question is from Rachel Deans. Whitehaven's notice of meeting states, Whitehaven's business is leveraged to the continuing forecast demand that exists in Asian export markets. The IEA notes that in a net zero 2050 scenario, coal-fired power generation falls by 75% from 2019 to 2030, and that most of this reduction comes from a limited number of countries, including China, India, and Southeast Asia. So is it fair to say that Whitehaven's business strategy is contingent on that net zero 2050 outcome not being achieved?
Thanks, Rachel. No, that is not fair to say. There continues to be a demand for coal under the IEA's SDS, which is consistent with the Paris Agreement. And we have a view about the role of very high quality coal in this context. I mean, we can look at these reports, but if you look at the transition aspect that quality coal is going to play into to a less carbon intensive environment in the future, there is a very, very strong place for coal in that transition, and in our analysis against the TCFD, it provides us with long-term resilience.
The next question is from Sally Hunter. Do the following four water facts: 1, the approval of new Vickery mine with a new water bore field; 2, 3 new pipelines to and from Maules Creek mine built without approval during the 2019 drought; 3, the application of a modification for a new pipeline between Vickery and Tarrawonga; 4, the current prosecution by the NRAR for surface water theft. Together, indicate a material risk of water scarcity for the company's operations in the Namoi Valley.
Chairman, I'll have a go at answering this one. Look, we certainly reject the proposition that the pipelines were built without approval. We work very closely with Department of Planning, NRA and the Narrabri Shire Council in order to deliver this critical infrastructure and maintain water security for the site. We acknowledge the drought was onerous for everybody, but we do also acknowledge the material benefit that comes from the deployment of an incremental megalitre of water at Maules Creek, given the some 600 jobs that we have there, as opposed to the alternate uses for a similar amount of water. Happily, the drought seems to be easing across eastern Australia. I know water security is an important thing for everybody, and all the initiatives that have been mentioned above have certainly been put in place in order to ensure continuity of operation during dry conditions, and we'll continue to do that. And we don't have any concerns about water security in this new year.
Paul, go to next question.
The next question is from Mr. Guy Abrahams and Ms. Kim Abrahams. When asked about physical climate risk at last year's AGM, Mr. Flynn said the company's crisis management plan left it well prepared for these types of eventualities. Last summer, dust and smoke from drought and fire conditions, made worse by climate change, saw reduced production guidance, causing a 10% share price drop. Has Whitehaven analysed the physical climate risks to its assets, operations, workforce and broader community under the 4% scenario the company uses to justify its expansion plans?
Thanks to the Abrahams. I'll just pass that to you, Paul, to comment on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The crisis management team has obviously been tested extensively during the course of FY20, as you imagine, with COVID-19, and has performed very well. Look, despite the drought, as I mentioned in the earlier remarks on question, operational continuity was maintained throughout this past year, despite the difficulties. But we were negatively impacted by labour shortages at Maules Creek and regional dust events, that is, dust and smoke blowing over our sites, which did cause some interruptions. But thankfully, the fire did not threaten any of our operations last year. Maules Creek is now fully manned and has been such since April or March, which is fantastic, of last year, that is. And we've updated the procedures around the operating procedures that govern our operations during those regional dust events, which should ensure that we have less disruptions in the future.
Thanks, Paul. Go to the next question.
The next question is from McCossey Investments. Item 1. Does the approval of Vickery with a new bore field combined with a new pipeline between Vickery and Tarrawonga under a Tarrawonga mine modification and the 3 new pipelines to Maules Creek mine built without approval during the 2019 drought all work together to facilitate the ability of Whitehaven to move water between mines without transparency, reducing the ability of the community and regulators to keep track of water use by different moves within the complex?
I'll just get Paul to respond to that question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, obviously the optionality of moving water around each of our sites is a tremendous benefit to all concerned, given that we don't need to provide water security independently of each when you have a portfolio of mines. All our pumps and pipelines are regulated and monitored and audited in terms of the flows that go through them. So I'm not concerned at all in that regard. There will be transparency for the regulator of flows through each of the elements of that infrastructure.
Thanks, Paul. Next question.
The next question is from Lee Norton and Associates. According to the Lock the Gates analysis of the Namoi region, the company owns more than 61,050 hectares over 471 freehold titles, a land area approaching the size of Singapore. It has been estimated that 90 farming families have been displaced from the Boggabri district by this land purchasing. Is this land being actively managed and cared for and continuing to contribute to the agricultural industry?
Thanks, Lee Norton Associates, for the question. About 4.6% of our land is currently involved in mining. More than 41,000 hectares of Whitehaven-owned land is used for agricultural purposes. That is, we have farmers on the land using that land for agricultural purposes, I'd like to reiterate. Contrary to the thrust of the question, we actually work very closely with all agricultural stakeholders in the region to ensure that that productive land that we own is maintained and remains in production. Paul, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I might just add, Chairman, that the balance of the land owned is actually, when you consider what's already deployed for agricultural purposes, in addition to the land which we're using for the mining activities themselves, the balance of it is largely consisted of biodiversity offset lands, and which is obviously the interest of long-term preservation of biodiversity values of that land.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Next question.
The next question is from Mr. Michael Dwyer. The annual report talks about a community and social impact compact, but during the public hearing for the Vickery Coal Project, people from the local community, some in tears, spoke about the poor record of the company in the district. Narrabri Council, usually supportive of the mining industry, objected to the project, raising issues of social dislocation, intergenerational equity and competition for water. Has the CEO been honest with shareholders about the company's reputation and standing in the community where it operates, and won't proceed with the Vickery project against the wishes of the community, only worsen this standing?
Thanks for the question, Michael. Just I'll make a comment, and I'll get Paul to comment, given that he's been heavily involved in a number of those community interactions. But from the board's perspective, we have absolutely confidence in the CEO and the management team and their honesty and engagement, not just with shareholders, but with the broader community. We take very, very seriously the responsibility we have and our social licence to operate within the community in the Gunnedah Basin and in those council areas of Gunnedah Council and Narrabri. It is important to us as a board and as a company that we maintain a good relationship with all the stakeholders in the area. I'll just hand over to Paul to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, we certainly acknowledge the diversity of views that are expressed, in relation to mining, and obviously the IPC hearings were an opportunity for that to manifest in its various forms. Some delivered passionately, and others in a more measured fashion. Having said that, the expression of support was actually overwhelmingly positive, contrary to the nature of the question's proposition. In fact, we had 2/3 and greater supporting the project in the various stages of opening submissions for the project, which was very positive to receive. And I note that Narrabri Council has, in the post-approval process since the IPC, has been very positive towards the project coming forward. I think the Narrabri area is obviously benefiting from lots of opportunities, not just Vickery, but other development opportunities, being inland rail and others in the area. So it points to a very positive future for the region.
Thanks, Paul. Next question.
The next question is from Mrs. Jan McNichol. Resolution 1, the official proponent of the Vickery project for the purposes of the Commonwealth Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, was changed from Whitehaven Coal to Vickery Coal 2 years ago. Given that the EPBC Act requires decision makers to take into account the environmental record of the proponent, is the company's practice of creating wholly owned subsidiaries to act as the proponents of individual mine operations a tactic to avoid the full history of its environmental breaches from being taken into consideration for a new project like Vickery?
I'll just answer the second part of the question first. No, it's not. And it's completely unrelated. I mean, this is a standard structure employed not just by us in a commercial sense, but more broadly across the industry. In the case of Vickery, like Narrabri and Maules Creek, the potential for a JV requires a structure into which potential JVPs can invest. So this is not about anything other than a commercial structure to enable us to manage our capital going into the future when we go to actually engage in the development of the Vickery mine. Paul, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, Chairman, look, I was just going to say to the aspect of the name change of the subsidiary itself, it was only simply to remove the name Whitehaven because obviously, as the Chairman's mentioned, the potential for a joint venture creation around the project Vickery is a real prospect. And in that event, potential joint ventures would be investing in Vickery, not actually in Whitehaven. It's actually at an asset level investment, and therefore the name Whitehaven Coal Proprietary is not appropriate when they're investing directly in the asset that owns the physical asset.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Next question.
The next question is from Dr. Margaret Bulbeck. Item 1. When does the board expect to make final investment decisions on the Vickery, Winchester South and Narrabri extension projects? What is the expected total capital expenditure cost of each project and how will they be financed?
Thanks, Margaret. We have provided guidance to the market and we are being cautious on capital allocation in this subdued price environment at the moment. We maintain open all options, and although we note the coal price has strengthened significantly in recent weeks, we want to see a clear pathway forward. So while it's unlikely FID will occur within this financial year, significant work is ongoing to enable us to move ahead as quickly as possible when circumstances permit. If I can refer you to the Investor Day presentation in September last year for the CapEx data that we provided to the market. But I mean, as we've done in the past when developing projects like Maules Creek and Narrabri, we will have ourselves in a state of preparedness for when the economic circumstances are right to develop these projects. Next question.
The next question's from Mr. Philip Parkin. Resolution 2, given the extremely poor performance of the business for FY20 and with reference to the position taken by the boards of other Australian companies recognising the hardship and challenges that all Australians are facing due to the current COVID-19 pandemic, how can the Whitehaven board support an STI benefit payment in the amount of over $700,000 to Mr. Paul Flynn?
Thanks, Philip. Just a first little correction. I know you've referred to a statutory calculation and not the actual award that was made under the STI to Paul, which was actually less than that figure that you quoted in your question. But we have a remuneration structure in the company that rewards and also incentivises our senior management team. The KPIs in the STI category are set at the beginning of the financial year, and so that the KMP, the key management personnel, can work against those in delivering for shareholders and thus getting a reward. This year, in the outcome of the FY20 STI, there are only 2 areas, I think, out of probably 6 that delivered an outcome for the management team, and one was on safety, where we actually achieved a stretch result. The target and the stretch component of that was set 12 months ago, and they were achieved, and we have one of the best safety records in the industry and certainly well below the industry average. Therefore, we believe that KPI was met, so therefore that paid. And then, of course, there's a small component of the KPI which is allocated for leadership, which is individually assessed under the circumstances, and we have traversed a very challenging year on a number of fronts, and the view was taken that the management team had addressed those well, notwithstanding the economic outcome, as alluded to in the question, but we've still got to maintain the stability and structure of the business going forward for when the market turns. I mean, obviously, revenues in a business like this are directly correlated to coal prices. We are now seeing that start to turn and improve, and so there wasn't, on those economic factors, a payout on those KPIs. Okay, next question.
The next question is from Mr. Philip Parkin. Resolution 2, with respect to the STI benefit awarded to Mr. Paul Flynn for FY20, a portion of this benefit relates to individual leadership. The board has assessed a target result of 100% outcome for the CEO in this performance condition. Given the extremely poor performance of the business in FY20, with 4 of 5 of the business-related KPI metrics resulting in below gateway performance, serious non-conformance with environmental approval conditions, continued lengthy delays in the approval process for the Vickery project, and upheaval within the executive ranks of the leadership team, how did the board assess the individual leadership performance of Mr. Paul Flynn as 100%?
Look, thanks, Philip. Again, I think a fair bit of this I've just answered, but if I can just add to that a business of this nature probably is more difficult to lead and manage in a tough time than a good time, in terms of managing costs. And at a time where we are growing, we're bringing new projects into the pipeline. It's bringing greater pressures on the structure of the management team during the course of the last 12 months. We have actually, and I think you alluded to this in your question, we have restructured the management team, and we've brought in some new components in terms of better environmental management, health and safety management, and operational management. And so, those elements of change all go into the decision about leadership. And I'll just conclude by saying that anybody that's run a big, diverse business that is so reliant on a commodity price for its revenue flows, it is much more difficult to manage in a tough year, obviously, than it is in a good year. And during that tough year, tough decisions need to be made to set that business up, i.e. the way we have done this year, for the future, so that when the market turns, and without doubt it will, we are best positioned to take advantage on behalf of shareholders in improved market circumstances. Okay, next question.
The next question is from Mr. Matthew Barker. Resolution 1. Will the new move to link CEO Paul Flynn's wage to environmental performance be enacted immediately so that Mr. Flynn's performance is measured against the outcomes of 3 current prosecutions for illegal tree clearing at Narrabri Underground, illegal surface water theft at Maules Creek mine, and the non-fulfilment of biodiversity offsets?
Look, thanks, Matthew. Obviously, we have acknowledged that environmental performance in FY20 could have been better, and it's something that we expect to be addressed. And so in setting the new KPI structure for FY21 with a stronger focus on environmental performance, obviously there will be be taken into consideration the way that we deal with current issues and most importantly issues going forward and our environmental performance going forward, so we don't have some of these circumstances arising in the future. We are in a business that has experienced rapid growth, and with that growth has come significant challenges on a number of fronts. We have moved very, very quickly in management in the restructuring of the organisation to focus on these critically important issues. That restructuring has been put in place, and we expect that will deliver a much, much better outcome. But of course, we will assess all these elements as part of that STI performance going forward. Okay, next question.
The next question is from Mr. Philip Parkin. The share price continues to languish at woeful levels. Why doesn't the share market agree with Mr. Flynn's positive analysis?
Well, the share market, and I'm not here to sort of advise on how it reacts to different circumstances, but as I've commented on a number of answers so far today, we are in a business where there's a direct correlation between coal price in the international marketplace, sentiment in the international marketplace, but there's also an added externality that is affecting the market generally, but specifically in our markets, and that's the advent this year of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's had an effect particularly on economic activity and growth in our key markets. Now, we have been very fortunate compared to a lot of other industries in the fact that we have maintained full employment. We've not accessed any government assistance in doing that. In some circumstances, in some assets, we've increased our employment. We have not had any pushback on contractual arrangements. Our production for the second quarter in FY21 is all but all sold under contract terms, notwithstanding the market circumstances as far as prices are concerned. But what we've seen in movement in the last week in coal prices, what the forward curve indicates, our view that economic stimulus is going to be deployed significantly in all our market country economies as we get to the other side of COVID-19 gives us a positive disposition towards the future. Next.
The next question's from Mr. Julian Vincent. The September quarterly report says Whitehaven is negotiating an amended interest coverage ratio with our lenders for the testing dates 31st of December 2020 and the 30th of June 2021, and that there will be a distribution restriction. Exactly what restriction is being placed on distributions and what consequences do we face if we're unable to renegotiate the ICR and meet the required ratio? Will our lenders demand earlier repayment of outstanding credit or even cancel the debt facilities?
Thanks, Julian, for a good question, and I'll just hand over to Paul to comment on that.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, we have concluded the process of amending our ICR, so very appreciative of the supportive banking group doing that in an orderly and expeditious manner. What it really does is just gives us greater flexibility to navigate these COVID-induced recessionary conditions to the extent that they persist longer than we would like. And I think that's a prudent and sensible measure that we should put in place, despite the fact that we are complying. But we've got to cover the downside scenario should a vaccine take longer, say for instance, and stimulus not re-enliven our customer economies at the rate at which we would like. So I think distributions themselves can still occur, but if we're availing ourselves of that flexibility on those concessionary ICR levels, then it's unlikely that any distribution will be made during that period.
Thanks, Paul. Next question.
The next question is from G&J Rogers Investments. What is Whitehaven Coal's comment on the passage of the federal government approval phase for the Vickery project? Is the IPC August state approval really the last hurdle?
Look, the New South Wales government approval, as indicated on through the IPC, was certainly the main approval. And we are hopeful that we can proceed through the federal government's EPBS process and secondary approvals expeditiously. Next question.
The next question is from Mr. Eric Ferrier. How long will it take for the company to pay off its long-term debt?
Thanks for that question. I think that's a good one for our CFO, Kevin, to answer. Kevin, do you want to handle that question, please?
Sure, Mark. The company maintains that facility on its books and expects to maintain a balance in that facility for a long time. I mean, through the last few years, we've always said to people we expect to maintain some debt on the balance sheet. So I don't expect us to pay it off. I expect us to reduce it and get it back to about 1.5 times EBITDA, and that's probably around that $400 to $500 million level drawn on the facility. But that's the long-term balance we expect to keep.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll go to the next question.
The next question is from Natalia Bueno. Item 1, following up on my previous question, will the stress testing of new projects at the FID stage include assessment against the IEA's net zero emissions 2050 scenario?
Thanks, Natalia. Look, we've outlined our approach to resilience testing, including using the 3 most commonly referenced and public scenarios presented by the IEA in its World Energy Outlook, which is consistent with the recommendations of the TCFD and with industry trends more broadly. Next question.
The next question is from Mr. Guy Abrahams and Ms. Kim Abrahams. Following on from our question regarding the physical climate risk, how was the predicted increases in severe weather events, more intense and widespread fire activity, and increased temperatures being included in future planning? How will these climate impacts affect our operations and our surrounding communities?
Thanks, Guy and Kim. I'll just pass that to Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Look, we've identified the possibility of physical risk to our assets from climate change and other risks in our sustainability report. And we believe at an operational level we're appropriately configured to ensure that we can manage these risks. Of course, in the more recent times, having experienced a very dry period, we are receiving an above average rainfall period across our sites, which is positive, and the country is looking great as a result of that recovery. But we feel we've got all these risks appropriately encapsulated in our sustainability report. We refer you to that.
Thanks, Paul. We'll go to the next question.
The next question is from John Saunders from Maules Consulting. What has been the feedback and reaction to your sustainability report?
I might also just pass that one to Paul.
Yep, thank you, Chairman. Look, this is our second release of our sustainability report, and the reception for the report has been excellent, I have to say. There's no doubt that our investors are looking for a broader discussion on sustainability more generally, really want to understand in their terms who the company is as they see encapsulated in our sustainability report. I think that's a really good way to describe it. The annual report being what we did last year as opposed to who we are, which is the sustainability report encapsulates. I do note that the sustainability and ESG discussions with our investors is broadening, which we welcome, and the focus across the entire gambit of ESG considerations, I think, has improved the quality of that discussion, particularly with our large institutional investors, which has seen over time, the institutional ownership in our register increase, which is great.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul. We'll go to the next question.
The next question is from Dr. Margaret Bulbeck. Thanks for your response to my question, which missed an important element. How will the Vickery, Winchester South and Narrabri extension projects be financed?
I think I'll pass that one to our CFO, Kevin, who will primarily be responsible for pulling together the finance to develop those projects. Kevin, you happy to answer that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And Dr. Bulbeck, that's really a good question. You know, over the last decade, we've funded the construction of Maules Creek. We funded the construction of Narrabri. We've expanded Tarrawonga. We've diversified the capital base upon which we draw our funds from. And no doubt over the next decade, my expectation is we'll diversify those capital sources again, and we'll bring in joint venture partners for that Vickery and Winchester South project. So I'm pretty confident that we'll get that done in this next decade with the cash flow from the business and those sources of capital. So thanks for your question.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll go to the next question.
The next question is from Mr. Ian McAleese and Mrs. Dana McAleese. Does the Queensland Government continue to support the development of the Winchester South project?
Thanks, Ian and Dana. The Winchester South project is obviously still proceeding through the approval process or the EIS process. But we certainly know that the Queensland Government has declared Winchester South a coordinated project, which does afford it a significant status. And we also know directionally that the government has been extremely supportive of similar scale projects in the Bowen Basin, given the investment and jobs that will be so central to Queensland and Australia's economic recovery. And if I can just add also that in the Queensland Government and their agencies have been very supportive, and has the local council in the Bowen Basin supportive of our ambitions to develop another metallurgical coal mine to add to our list of assets that we have, obviously this one in Queensland. And although we know there's an election on in Queensland at the moment, we would also expect the same level of support if there is a change in government. Okay, next question.
The next question is from Mr. Andrew Lucas. In its impairment assessment of property, plant and equipment, did the audit report consider coal price forecasts consistent with a 1.5 degree warming scenario? Did the auditor consider and follow the Auditing Assurance Standards Board guidance on climate-related risks and disclosures and the IFRS's standards on the same topic?
Thank Andrew for his question. I'll flip to Kevin, the CFO, in a minute, and to the auditor, but just in advance of that, management and board have considered possible impacts of climate change in preparing the financial statements. The Audit and Risk and Management Committee considers the matter in detail. It receives and considers detailed inputs from management and discusses with the auditor the details of the auditor's assessment. The committee and board review includes detailed consideration and of the implications of the International Energy Agency's annual World Energy Outlook. Periodically, the board travels to end-user customer countries, obviously not recently, and I, as the chairman, travel with the CEO and AGM of Sales and Marketing each year to visit key customers and gather first-hand information in relation to end markets, including relevant developments in the national and multilateral public policy space. So the board does consider the possible impact of climate change when approving the financial statements and reports of the company. But to add to that, I'll hand over to our CFO, Kevin Ball, and then to our auditors to provide further information. So over to you first, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks for that introduction. Look, management and board really do consider the possible impacts of climate change in preparing these financial statements. Specifically, it's quite a large body of work we undertake in really about assessing the future cash flows. We sit down and have a look at the supply and demand, which then really leads us to a range of prices and price conditions that apply. And when looking at the forecast prices, what we consider are the commitments made by customer countries to the Paris Accord, statements by government on energy security. We really see a lot of inbound customer contacts and inquiries ahead of contracts being executed. And we consider the views of our joint venture partners who are actually active in all these markets in which we play. We also talk to external advisors, and we receive advice from a number of really well-noted suppliers, such as Crew & Mackenzie. And all of these things factor into the pricing on factor into our pricing, both in the short term, the medium term, and the long term. So for impairment purposes, as you would well understand, Mr. Lucas, we're required to estimate the recoverable amount of property, plant and equipment, and informing our views, we develop a range of outcomes. So the sustainable development scenario is implicit in the materials that we consider, but it's only one factor in a number of factors. And regarding disclosures of climate change risks, I recognise the documents that you referenced in your question, but I draw your attention to the disclosures that we make in the operating and financial review section of the Directors' Report, and separately the information that's set out in the company's sustainability report, entitled a comprehensive approach to sustainability, which it really is. So these things are in line with the task force on climate-related financial disclosures, and I know we were, one of the first companies, pure play coal companies, to come out and produce those reports. So having said that, I'll hand the question over to the people which you directed it to, which are the auditors.
Cheers, thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. Ryan, want to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Kevin. So I'll just reiterate that I think the company's responsible for the preparation of the financial statements, and I think they've provided a good summary of the discussions that were had, at the company level and with the auditors in preparing the financial statements. But I am happy to talk through, I guess, how we approach climate change from an audit process perspective. In planning the audit and designing our audit procedures, we look at many risks and factors in the business. We look at market conditions, asset performance. We look at the performance of the mines, government policies, but we also look at climate change. You'll also note that impairment of property, plant and equipment was a key audit matter for the purpose of our audit report, which you can find on pages 114 to 119 of the annual report. So in performing our procedures, which are outlined in the report, we do some detailed work on the management's models. We also use our internal experts who are valuation experts on mining companies, and they support us in that work. We consider all the assumptions in the model. We basically, with reference to market pricing specifically, that is a key element that underpins the requirements of the accounting standards. So in doing that work, we do look at management's view. We look at the external consultants that Kevin referred to. We also look at industry consensus pricing for those forecasts, once again, over the short, medium and long term. So after assessing all those assumptions, we were comfortable that management's assumptions regarding impairment fell within a reasonable range. With regard to the two guidance notes that are referred to, yes, I am aware of those two guidance notes. I will note they're not mandatory, but they do provide recommendations of things that the auditor should consider or may consider during their audit process. I did consider that guidance in forming my audit opinion, and also the requirements of all the other accounting standards, and concluded that all material disclosures that are required in the financial statements were included. So thank you, Chairman.
Thanks very much, Ryan, and thanks, Kevin, for that detailed response to Andrew Lucas. As there are no further questions, I will shortly be closing voting. Can I ask all shareholders who have not already submitted their votes to do so now? And I'm going to pause the meeting for 60 seconds to allow shareholders to finalise their votes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As the time for voting has now expired, I propose to now close the poll. and the results will shortly be displayed on the screen. So there you should be able to see the results on the screen, and as you can see, resolutions 1 to 4 have been passed. Resolution 5 has not been passed. So as a result, we will not be voting on resolution 6 today. Ladies and gentlemen, that completes the formal business of this meeting, and I now propose to formally declare the meeting closed. And thank you all very, very much for your patience and participation in this year's annual general meeting. Thank you.